Awesome. So this is so exciting. We'd love for you to meet our panelists. We have Kristen Sowers with us this evening. She is an award-winning author of Fostering Resilient Learners, Strategies for Creating a Trauma-Sensitive Classroom and Environment, and several other publications as well. We have Dr. Lorea Martinez with us. She is the author of Teaching with Heart in Mind, a wonderful new book that came out. And we also have Fern Seiden with us, and Fern is the Director of Student Wellness for the Merrimack School District. So we might have some Merrimack folks on the line with us tonight. You know Fern. And so we're very grateful for these wonderful women to give us some time this evening. And we're really excited to hear what they have to say. And you will hear from them in just a second. And they'll be able to share with you a little bit more about themselves and their experiences. All right, so really briefly, and I only have 2 slides for you here, just to really give you an overview. Social emotional health and well-being, and we're talking about a child's or a human's ability really, but we're going to focus this dialogue on our kids. A child's ability to identify and regulate their emotions and manage stress and self-motivate, goal set. The ability to form these healthy relationships and help themselves feel safe and secure in their environments, whether it's a home environment, school environment. Fostering these skills will help with perspective taking and empathizing with others, identifying and solving problems, negotiating through conflict, and ultimately communicating effectively, right? And so some benefits, we could actually spend the next 90 minutes talking about benefits, right? But just some benefits of social emotional health and well-being in our children, that we'll see an increased positive attitude toward themselves and others, confidence, persistence, perseverance, peace, increased empathy, a sense of connection and commitment to school, and an increased academic success, a sense of purpose, positive social behaviors and relationships with those in their lives. And we will see reduced feelings of anxiety and depression, and conduct problems or that risk-taking behavior. So just an overview, and we're going to touch upon these components as part of our dialogue, but I just wanted you to have a visual sort of a guide of where we're going. So this is very exciting. So this is the point where we're going to hear from our panelists, and then we'll open the floor for discussion. And so I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to exit right here. And then I am going to ask Miss Kristen Sowers to start. Kristen, where are you, my friend?
Hello, everyone. Yeah, thanks. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. I gotta let you know my internet is not working very great. It's already kicked me off once. So if I disappear, it's not on purpose. I will just try and come back if it lets me. I live kind of in a rural area, and it's not a very clear day. So I'm on the West Coast. And so when it gets like this, it sometimes gets a little naughty. So like Lauren said, I'm really happy to be here. I started out in the field of early learning and really learned a lot about sharing responsibilities of raising kids. And I often had a lot of the littles longer awake than they were with their parents. I had them 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. And that's where I learned the term grace. And then I went into a complete 180, and I went and did some gang prevention in East San Jose. And there I learned a lot about the culture of gang violence. I saw firsthand racism and discrimination take place. I was there during the Rodney King riots and the quake of '89. So then I thought I wanted to be a police officer. So I moved back to my Spokane hometown of Spokane, Washington, and went to work for a police department and learned a lot about first response. And from there, I don't know if being law enforcement is the best fit for me. I think I might be a better fit in counseling. So I went to work for a residential facility where kids were aging out of the foster care system and deemed unplaceable, or whatever that means. And it was there that it dawned on me, it wasn't what I was doing for a living, it was who I was working with. And I'd always been drawn to this amazing population of incredible people who had experienced some really not okay things. And they weren't always handling the stress of those experiences very effectively. So I went back to school and got my graduate degree and ran an outpatient program specializing in working with families impacted by violence. And there, two things dawned on me. One was I knew mental health services were helpful. We can all benefit from having someone to talk to, but I knew we weren't enough. Only 1 in 10 people get services that need it, kind of leaves the other 9 hanging out there. So, and the other thing that dawned on me, and I still stand by this, is I don't believe experiencing something not okay should necessarily equate to a mental health diagnosis. And we in this country see trauma as a mental health issue. I see it as a mess of life issue that no one's really immune from. So I started to do outreach to education because I knew schools were the one place that kids were guaranteed to be. And from there, I was encouraged to write a couple of books. And I knew that the adults were struggling with balancing accountability and availability with academic and emotional availability. And so I've been doing this for over 30 years, and we're across the globe, and I get to work with families and parents and education professionals, mental health service providers, just on what will our kids to experience positive and what do our adults need to feel effective in their role. So I'm happy to join you here with some pretty amazing panelists. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Dr. Lorea Martinez. Lorea, would you like to share?
Yes, absolutely. Hi, everyone. So great to be in this space with all of you. I'm joining you from sunny California. It's not dinner time for me yet, but just excited to be here. I'm the founder of Heart in Mind, which is a company dedicated to helping teachers and schools to implement social emotional learning in their programs and in their teaching practices. I've been especially in the SEL field for more than 10 years. And this year, as Lauren mentioned, I was able to publish a book that really synthesizes everything that I believe people should know about social emotional learning. The title is Teaching with the Heart in Mind, and HEART is actually an acronym for 5 essential social and emotional skills. So a little appetizer there to entice your attention. But I started my career in special education I worked with neurodiverse students for several years. And when I was doing my doctoral program at the time, I was really focused on research and looking at student achievement. And I realized there was a set of skills that we were not paying attention to with the focus on academics. And I had this intuition that there were these other skills that we were not teaching in schools, we were not helping students develop. And for my special ed students, sometimes those were the skills that really draw them back, and they were not able to really perform in the classroom because of that. And that's how I started my research. I discovered that there was this field called SEL. Of course, that was many years ago, so it wasn't as top to mind for people. And I really fell in love with the field because I believe that when we are helping students to develop these social emotional skills, they can really be successful. They can be happy citizens. They can be contributors in our society. So I truly believe in this work and the power and the impact that it can have on our kids and the adults as well. So happy to be here and tell you more about what I know about how SEL can help our kids.
Thank you, Lorea. Fern Seiden.
Hi, everybody. So I am the Director of Student Wellness at the Merrimack School District, and I'm one of many people taking on these roles in the state of New Hampshire because New Hampshire for quite some time now has become more and more aware of the power of this kind of work to raise up our students in all ways so that they develop the academic skills as well as the social emotional skills that can help them, and not seeing them as sort of two separate things, but as they are very integrated in sort of what makes a successful human being, not just in school, but when they graduate and go into their lives to join the world as citizens. So I'm really excited to be here. This is a huge, I'm very passionate about this topic, and I really, really believe strongly in it. And it is hard work, and it's not easy. It's a real paradigm shift, and it is not. It's slow to take root and find the way into the classroom. And so through implementation processes, it's quite a process. So I've seen, just if I could just if you could see what it's like in a classroom with a teacher who's really skilled and who has it down and has integrated it, and hear them speak, it's truly a powerful testimony to what this can do for kids. And so I'm really thrilled to be here tonight with two people who I know are quite influential and have influenced us in our district and all around New Hampshire. So thank you.
Thank you. Lauren, I'm going to jump in for a quick second. I wanted to make sure everyone knew that there was a way to view. So for those of you that don't use Zoom all the time, there's different views in the upper right corner where it says view, and you can have all the boxes be equal, but there's also a view that will allow you to emphasize the speaker. And it's the one where there's a big box and 3 little dots above it. Okay, so for those of you, for parents, or if you're not on Zoom all the time, just know that there's a way so that the person speaking is being in your picture.
Great. Thanks, Karen. So I think we're going to kick off with a question that actually to Fern, you sort of, and you can go first, Fern, but you touched upon it in terms of the integration between social emotional skills, developing these explicit skills, and the connection into school and academics. So simply, how is social emotional health connected to academic success?
Well, one of the things that is really important to understand is the backdrop of this is a lot of new learning. Well, not very new, but a lot of research into how kids learn. And as neuroscience and as the sort of field of the study of teaching and learning happen, we learn more as educators. So we're constantly learning. It's a professional field, so we're constantly learning new things. And that has really shaped a lot of our understanding. And so one way to think about it is that all learning is a social experience. So but what we try to understand is how, if you think of the things that you remember, what you learn best is things that you enjoy. It's times that you felt really safe. And it's also times that you felt a great sense of belonging or a sense of pride. And so the kinds of things that when we are learning best, we have sort of the conditions for learning are set for us. And that's what helps us be the best learners we can be. And so for us to think, that's why it's really important not to kind of say, well, there's academic learning over here, and we're going to start today with our academic work, and later we'll do our SEL. They're not two separate things. There is such thing as explicit SEL instruction where we want to say, we're going to teach the skill of cooperation, cooperative learning, collaborative groups, and how to do that. Really important skill, because you can't get by in life in the world of work or school without having those skills, and those, or for instance, relationship skills, how to communicate, so etc. So that is really important to understand, that they're not two separate things. What we found is that when we create the conditions for learning, which is providing safety, a sense of community, a sense of belonging, we can learn how to put those things in place. And I think that's a big change over time. I don't think the teachers in my day when I was growing up sort of had books like Kristen's books or Lorea's books teaching us about how you can do that and what the research says about that. So now we can take that information, we can say, let's translate that. How can I, as a teacher, put some practices into place that really reach all students? And, even students who may have come from really hard places or experienced really hard things, and that when we can reach them, we raise all kids up. And so it's, I guess that, the outcome is that kids learn more. And there's lots and lots of research that just teaches us so much about the value and benefit. And that research goes back, that's not like recent, that's pretty, some of it, I remember first reading it and going, wow, for every dollar you spend on social emotional learning in school, you get $11 back in terms of the outcome of success of that student. But that's from I think it's 2011 maybe, or 2013. It's not new research. So it's slowly building. We have quite a range of research now that we can really be confident that pulling this work together and integrating it into our daily practices. So it's not just, we're not giving academics up for social emotional learning. We're not displacing academics for social emotional learning. That's one thing I think is really important to understand. So did I answer that? I hope that was a good answer, but I think that's so critical that people understand how we really know that this is a worthwhile pursuit for our kids.
Thank you, Fern. And I wanted to double click on something that you said that I think is so crucial that we understand, is that in the past, we used to think that our cognitive processing and our emotional processing, they were two separate things in our brains. And today, based on the research that has been done in affective neuroscience, we know that in order to remember new concepts, to make decisions, to learn new skills, we need emotions are involved. It is neurobiologically impossible to do any of that cognitive processing without emotions. So what SEL does is it brings that knowledge into the classroom. So we are actually teaching how the brain learns, that we are using all that research to really be effective in how we work with students so they can be the best learners that they can be.
Thank you. Kristen?
And I'm kind of a keep it simple person, and it comes down to the reality that stressed brains don't teach effectively and stressed brains don't learn effectively. And so if we're not in a regulated place, that allows us to really incorporate the concepts necessary to learn. And so it is integrated. And I echo both Fern and Larea that this is such an essential piece that kids don't learn from people they don't like. Relation, body awareness, self-awareness. So our kids learn early on what it means to be learning ready, learning compromised, and not learning ready. So that's the one thing.
Thank you. Yeah, and I guess I also wanted to explore this a little bit too. I mean, we're talking about students and students accessing, but I want to talk about the adults too. And Larea, I know you did a lot with this, in your book. But I want to talk a little bit about how we can take care of the adults as well, fostering the social emotional competence in adults, right? Because, they are the ones with the kids all day. And to Kristen's point, they're in stressed environments. And so, let's connect this to adults. We have a lot of educators on the call today. And in our work at DS this fall, we've really committed to talking about educator SEL. So Larea, if you want to maybe start with that, and Fern and Kristen, would love to hear your thoughts too.
Yes, so something that I often share is that we cannot teach what we don't practice. I'm going to say that again. We cannot teach what we don't practice. So, and that's true for us as parents. I have two girls, and I can tell you that the day when I snap back and I'm not on my best behavior, they're going to call on me and say, Mom, wow, you are not using your mindful breathing or whatever thing, right? So as adults, it is almost like we're being hypocrites if we are asking kids to do things that we don't do themselves as adults. And that is true in different ways. One, because kids are watching us even when we don't think that we are teaching them something. Right? Kids learn from our behaviors, even when we don't use any words, how we respond to a stressful situation, what we do when they maybe make a poor choice, right? They are watching us. So it is very important as adults that we practice these skills that we say are so relevant and so essential. So that's one piece. And then the other thing, more related to what you were asking, Lauren, is what has happened, I think, with the pandemic is it has shown that the adults were hurting, right? We have an educational system where the teachers had been hurting, I think, for a long time, but today we see that that is even more, it has been exacerbated because of the pandemic. So in a way, when we think about SEL, it's not only what happens in the classroom, but it's also how we are creating the systems and the procedures, the protocols to support the well-being of everybody who is part of our learning communities. And that includes from the office manager to the janitor who's cleaning the building to the teachers, right? We need to be in a community where we are supporting each other to practice these skills, to develop these skills, and to truly create places where the adults can be well, because if the adults are not well, the children cannot be well. So those two things are connected. So I think that in our interventions with kids, we cannot forget the adult piece. It's almost like a prerequisite before we can even think about supporting our kids.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. Fern, do you want to speak to this? And I'm also wondering maybe in your district, what you folks are doing to support your staff in this area?
Well, I think this is where I just want to send out some props to administrators and parents, and sort of how we're all working. We have to all be working together, because a lot of what happens with staff wellness, it's part of a school community. So, I think when we think about a school community, we're thinking about how the school leaders are leading that school family toward wellness, and the kinds of structures they're setting up and systems. So, how much emphasis, for instance, are you placing on getting through the curriculum versus how much emphasis are you placing on making sure that people are well and prioritizing relationships and the curriculum? Again, they're not trade-offs, but that you're not going to get through the curriculum if you're not well. So you have to really front load that experience of supporting your staff. So I've seen administrators just working harder than ever to try to reach their staff and find creative ways to support them, from staff meetings focused on learning how to talk about feelings and express emotions, and different ways of there's a staff quiet spaces, rooms that they can go to, just get away and have real quiet away time, to tap out systems for teachers to say, I need a break just for a minute, and having like a buddy teachers that you can do that with. So people are working really hard to find that, and there's no perfect answer. And then on the other side of the equation, and I saw somebody wrote in the chat about parents, I think it's really, really important. I mean, the whole system is super stressed. I mean, it can't be stated enough that we are the crisis is not over. We're still in it, I mean, I could go on and on about it. I mean, just the first 25 to 30 minutes of the day is figuring out how many subs that you need that you don't have, and how to rearrange kids so that they can all be together. And so then you have kids who have teachers flooding in, and like different people every few hours going in and out, right? So already that's just so difficult for learning, and for all people involved. So it's really important that we do work on our SEL families too, to really try to regulate, before sending an email, or try to, we understand that everybody is stressed. So how can we all behave in ways that we can be good to each other, and start from sort of that place where we all know we're behind the kids and we want to do the best by them. So it's been really, really hard, I have to say. And that is the critical piece, is staff wellness is critical. So.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to add, Lauren, there's something about the work with the adults that a big part of it is unlearning what we were taught as kids. So when growing up, we were, most of us, and this is generalizing, but we were taught that, if you need to focus on work, or if something is happening, kind of like you have to ignore your emotions or suppress them. You cannot show them in social situations. If you are a female, male, like it varies. What is the social expectation for how we share emotions in social contexts? Those are aspects that we need to unlearn in order to work with our kids more effectively, right? Because we know that emotions, if we don't take the time to name them and process them, they're going to come back and they're going to show up in ways that are not productive, right? When you send that upset email, or when you give a sharp response to your child or to your coworker, maybe you are fighting with your spouse, right? All the many social situations we have on a regular basis, those are opportunities to practice. What am I feeling in this moment? And not to stay in that place, but to really learn, what is that emotion trying to tell me? What is happening inside? And have the time to process it, so then I can move on, right? Then I know that I have that information and I can move on, so I can make better decisions in my life. And I know that for me personally, that has been one of the greatest lessons, to say, if I have an emotion, that's my body telling me, pay attention, right? Like this is the red flag. There's something happening. I want you to pay attention, right? So it's using the wisdom of our bodies, our minds, in order to really identify what's happening. And I feel like in that process, there's a lot of unlearning what we were taught in school, in our families, right? We all have certain behavior patterns, right? And some of us are very open with our emotions. Other people are very, reserved. And I think that part of this process is also finding that balance of how we can really become fluent with our emotions, so they don't control our lives, and we can just use them as tools instead of having them being an obstacle for fulfilling our goals and our dreams.
Yeah, thank you. Kristen, did you have anything to add in terms of the adult social emotional competence? I know you popped out, and we're glad you're back.
I do. Thanks. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, my internet's so naughty. I'm so sorry, team. I do have something. We wrote the first book for the adults, and no one is immune from stress. And boy, howdy, have things been stressful. Oh my gosh. And so I think when we recognize that life has been challenging, and as parents, we've been asked to do things way outside of our comfort zone. We've asked a lot of our education staff to step up and do things that they didn't anticipate doing. And the unpredictability of everything as of late has been it's been hard, team. It has. And the thing I realize is that the only thing we can really control is regulation and how we manage our stress. And part of what we're doing is we can't always stop the mess from happening, and we can empower ourselves and our kids to figure out how to manage despite the mess. That's resilience, right? And the thing I can control is how somebody experiences me, how I walk into an interaction. As an adult, I can't always control district mandates. As parents, I can't always control if my kid's sent home for 10 days or not. We don't always have a say in our work day. We don't always have a say in how things go. But we do have control of how we share our experiences and the mindsets that we carry into those interactions. And as an adult, am I contributing to the solution? Or am I contributing to the problem? And if there's things that I need to understand differently to make this child's life more successful, then I need to understand and ask those questions. As a parent, there's things I'm worried about. I need to be able to have permission to have hard conversations and ask my child what they need, ask for help and support, because we're not in this alone and there is no playbook for this. We're kind of building the plane as we fly it. And I just think at the end of the day, as an adult, I want my colleagues, my peers, my students to experience that I saw them and they mattered and their time with me was valuable. And if there's things I need to sustain that energy, then what could that look like? And Lori alluded to that with that whole culture of safety. Are we really creating a safe place so we can be effective in our role as adults, but also in our role in serving you? So those things I would add.
Great. Thank you so much. Karen, I'm just going to ask you a question. How are we doing in the chat? I've got a couple things, but I wanted to know if anything specific had popped up.
Not much has popped up.
Okie dokie. I want to talk a little bit about relationships, and Ken and I think it was Clyde brought up the topic of relationships, and we had an inquiry from a participant at time of registration in terms of, how can I get parents on board with SEL, right? First of all, how do we bring parents on board? I've got, a student that's struggling. They need more. Parents are resistant. So can we talk a little bit about, forging these relationships, really nurturing relationships between school and home, and how to bring in those parents who are resistant to this. And some of it, maybe even Larea, you touched upon it in terms of like, we need to unlearn, right, what we learned, and that could be a piece of it. So I don't know if you wanted to start with that, Larea.
Yes, and I really like that you use the word resistance. And when I think about resistance, I think about 3 levels. And we don't get it right. So the first, people may show resistance at the first level when they don't have information, right? So think about parents that maybe they don't have the information about why SEL is important and everything that we have spoken up to this point in terms of the research that has been done that shows improved student outcomes, reduced behavior challenges, improved sense of belonging and satisfaction at the school. Maybe they need information. Level 2 is when they resist because they are experiencing emotions like maybe it's fear, maybe it's they don't trust it, right? And when that happens, the strategy that we may use to work with that resistance is different. Maybe we need to create a container where parents can share their concerns about what it is that we are trying to teach kids. And our job as educators, I see it as bringing them into the conversation to validate those emotions, to not say, oh, you shouldn't feel that way, but to work with those emotions. The third level is sometimes there is resistance when we are pushing against the authority or the person who's leading that change or leading that work. And if that's the case, we need to pull all the tools in our toolbox in order to work with that. But I feel like when we talk about SEL implementation, and in this particular case, working with parents, many times we go to level 1 where we are providing information and data, but we don't acknowledge, or we miss to acknowledge, that parents come to this work with concerns, with fears, with worries about the development of their kids, right? Their job is to protect their kids and make sure their kids are doing well in class, that they are happy, that they are learning. And maybe that's what they are bringing into the conversation, right? So I think that even like acknowledging that parents are going to have emotions about what we educators do in the classroom can create a space to have a different kind of conversation where we are inviting parents and we are creating that space for validating the emotions that parents bring into the space.
Thank you. Fern?
I really just learned a lot from that. That was a great, it was great to hear that kind of discernment between what is being presented when we're working with parents. And I think it's, there are some really important things that really help good relationships to happen. One thing in productive relationships, the first thing I always, and I was a school counselor for 17 or 18 years. And I think I always start where I feel like parents are always, they're just doing the best. They're always doing the best they can with what they have in the moment and what they understand in the moment. And I never met a parent who didn't have, just love guiding them in whatever their response was for their child in that moment. So starting with that, I feel like is the most important thing that we kind of forge through and use our connections and our relationship skills to build that trust. And then moving through that, I think it's really important that we understand that there are multiple ways to communicate. And if we're just putting information out there, that's one thing. And I think that's it's hard. It's a lot of work to do it. But I find even myself like, okay, I'll do a workshop on that and I'll do a workshop then and provide information, which is really important. But at the school level, we really need to give, and even district level in some ways, really need to give kind of opportunities for two-way communication, and with the teacher and the principals and parents meeting together and developing networks of people working together. And so that's, I think, very powerful and useful. So I think we work through by being good listeners and by really believing that we're all in this together. That really, I know that's cliche, but it's assuming positive intentions, I think is really important, and coming at it from that perspective. So that's what I would say.
Thank you, Fern. Kristen, did you want to add?
Yeah, I do. I think parents are essential partners. They are essential partners in this. And I think sometimes our mindset can get in the way of a positive connection. So if I'm coming into it from an educator's perspective of this parent's really hard to connect with, this parent's kind of resistant, this parent isn't really willing to partner, if I'm a parent saying the school only calls me when something's wrong with my kid, if we have this mindset of expectation, sometimes that gets in the way of really helpful, healthy, solution focused work. Like if I'm describing, I'm really finding a way to connect with this parent is much different than this parent doesn't seem invested. And I think we have to be careful of our language. The other thing we have to be careful about is recognition of experience. And not all of us have had healthy experience in education. And sometimes what's happening is bigger than us. And Clyde, you alluded to that in your chat. I think it's important for us to be mindful of it is intimidating. And sometimes in education, we want parents to comply with this box. You can only meet with us at this time, during this way, in this way. And that's not always easy for a parent. Some of the most productive interventions I've seen is when we've gone to the parent's house, or we've met at the park, or we've had a conference on a Saturday, because it doesn't always work this way for everybody. And I just think if we're intentional and inclusive, if we're making effort to connect on a regular basis in positive ways, as a parent, I know for me, I want to hear that my kid's doing awesome. I don't always want to hear that my kid's struggling. I want to hear the other side of it. I want to hear and experience positive moments and And because our kids are positive and they do great things, they do. Sometimes we don't always see it because our mindsets get in the way of only looking for certain things. And I think if we can experience our histories and how that can sometimes impact trust, we could make more productive leeway with our families.
Hey, Lauren, there's a couple things in the chat.
Yeah.
Wanna jump in? Yeah, so I just want to acknowledge that Clyde wrote in and talked about effective communication with parents and what we were just talking about the parents' experience impacting their current parents' experience in education, impacting their current experience as parents of children in schools. And then Cheryl wrote in and was wondering about what kinds of standards New Hampshire has in place for SEL and what kind of growth we can expect sort of in a 5-year plan. And if there are no standards, does anybody know about standards that are being developed?
Fern, do you wanna field that one?
Sure. So New Hampshire has not developed, there are many states that have developed standards and competencies that are laid out and that schools adopt. And New Hampshire hasn't sort of provided that as like sort of a curriculum. Here are the competencies that we expect every school to address. But there are places in the state that have, for instance, the North Country Collaborative for SEL has done a beautiful job laying out a set of sort of competencies around that. And so schools are forging ahead and using a lot of different models that are out there. And so it's a little bit of, however, we do have the Bureau of Student Wellness. And I don't know if you have ever been on the Bureau of Student Wellness website on the DOE, the Department of Education's website in New Hampshire, but they're a wonderful, that bureau sits within the DOE and they provide just a lot of great information and have really been supportive of districts developing tiered support. So understanding what we can give all kids, what we can give some kids who need more to manage emotions or learn relationship skills or learn coping strategies. And then what we can give the very few who really, really struggle and sort of provide more intensive support. So that's called a multi-tiered system. And so the DOE working and the Bureau of Student Wellness within that are really supporting districts to develop the pathways that are appropriate for their personal communities. So, or their home communities. So you'll find it's different in each place, but a lot of support from the state in terms of the technology or the people. They have people who come and help our districts develop these things. So I think that's the most accurate answer. There's lots of resources that people are using though right now in districts to develop this.
Thanks, Fern. Anybody want to add? I think Fern's probably our New Hampshire SEL and Lauren, of course, experts who would be able to best.
Go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Fern.
I would want to just plug that website again. Just if you are looking, for instance, they have wonderful toolkits for families to use, like on grief, for instance, or incarceration or drug and alcohol misuse. There's a lot of toolkits that they have that you can go in and use find resources and tools for that. And there's a lot happening in this state right now in developing this statewide system of care, and a really big plug I want to make in a big role of schools and this time is not seeing schools as the only place where SEL is, schools and partner with families, but we also need to start understanding our relationship to community supports and have kind of break down some of those barriers, because kids don't live in a column of just home and school. They live in the larger community. They go to the YMCA, they go to their MYA, their their youth sports. They are part of our community. So they might seek supports from the mental health system in our community. And so how we develop those relationships is really, really important, and is part of most SEL models that are being adopted. So lots of toolkits on that website, and the DOE has just done a beautiful job with that.
And Ken just popped in the address.
Yeah, thank you.
For
And
that.
I will, thanks, Ken. I'm also gonna, I'll put that in. We'll send all participants an email within 48 hours of the slides and some resources. And so we will include that again. So if you don't catch it here, we will send it to you as part of the resources. But yeah, thank you, Fern.
And I just want to jump in for a sec. Jacqueline, thank you for writing it about Choose Love. The state of New Hampshire does provide a curriculum for free use. So they support a curriculum called Choose Love, which many schools in New Hampshire use as a curriculum to guide their SEL work.
Yeah, and we do know that Choose Love is actually out in the community as well. In different towns municipalities have adopted that as well. And I know the folks who are leading that organization are out in communities as well as in school. So that is really exciting. Loraya or Kristen, did you want to add in that with standards? I don't know if you wanted to touch upon the castle at all, or if you had some thoughts.
Yeah, I just wanted to share a little bit the work that we have been doing in California. So California got some funds from FEMA that went to the county offices of education, and actually the 58 county offices of education are involved in a SEL statewide community of practice. So they come together once a month to exchange best practices, to look at some highlights of what's happening in some of the districts that are more advanced in the SEL work. And one of the initiatives that was done through this SEL community of practice was a collaboration with the Greater Good Science Center out of UC Berkeley, and I put the link in the chat. And what I really like about this, in addition to these are, free SEL lessons that you can access, and that this is high quality SEL content. But if you sign up on the website, there is a link at the top that you will see California social emotional learning. And if you sign up there, or if you go to that link, you will have access to 5 different training modules. This is all free. And these have been curated by experts in the field, that the content is really good, it's all research-based. And it has the possibility of doing it as an individual if you are an educator who wants to know more, but it also has group facilitation. So for example, if your school wants to engage the whole staff in doing SEL professional development, that would be a huge resource. And I know the module number 4 is the one on SEL and academic integration. And I did that one in partnership with another colleague here in California. So just putting it that plug, because I know sometimes it's hard to come across good SEL professional development, and this is high quality, and it's also free, which is many times a plus.
And Loraya, if I'm not mistaken, on Greater Good, there's also a lot of family and parent resources as well, correct? And the Greater Good site, yeah.
Yes, it's a wonderful site, and they have a parenting newsletter as well. So definitely a site that I go often to look for what's the latest research and get some tips for my parenting live and educator side as well.
Thanks.
Great.
I think the only thing I would add, I think the only thing I would add is that whatever curriculum or practice you adapt, it's essential that we have that common language shared. So if our kids are learning things in class about how to express their emotions, or those basic competencies that we're trying to get across through all these varied ways, it's got to be kind of organic within the culture of the context of the community you live. What might work in an inner city population might look different than a rural population. I think the key foundation is common language. So as a parent, I know what that verbiage means. I can use that verbiage at home, that there's some cross communication. So the integration of that awareness, that reflection, all those skills is shared. So we're working collaboratively as a
Yeah, that's so important. And all the stakeholders. I mean, you've got kids traveling by bus home, and we want those folks speaking the same language, because we know we've got issues on the bus, and the folks working in the cafeterias and the libraries, and out in the community after school programs, which aren't necessarily related to the school itself, right? We might have other programs coming in and taking care of kids after school, and that's just so important. So thank you for bringing up that piece about common language. We have had several inquiries for questions during registration from parents who've expressed concern with their child's anger or frustration or anxiety, high anxiety. And so I'm wondering if our panelists can talk about how we might be able to differentiate between what's developmentally appropriate in terms of social emotional struggles and growth versus perhaps what's more of a serious issue. So Kristen, I don't know if you want to take that first.
Yeah, I think we're hearing this question a lot. And part of it is that reassurance that what we're seeing right now because of the pandemic is, for a lot of our youth, about a 2-year delay in social. So if I'm in 2nd grade, I might have more of the emotional state of a kindergartner. If I'm in 4th grade, I might be more like a 2nd grade. If I'm in 9th grade, I might be more like 7th grade. Like when I was working with a high school, it was like a ding, ding, ding with the staff. They're like, oh my gosh, the kids never learned how to pass periods. They went from one teacher all day to multiple teachers in a day. They didn't have that middle school consistent transition. So I think we should anticipate that our kids have kind of been in and out, back and forth, depending on what you've had in your communities. So we're going to see a little bit of a lag there. And so that's where we're really working on communication skills and regulation skills and ways to communicate our needs. And I think just as parents, we have to be willing to have hard conversations. And when our child comes to us and says, I'm just struggling, or we witness them struggling, I think we name it to tame it. Like, I notice that you're really having a hard time. Tell me what that's going on. Tell me how that's affecting you. Tell me what you think will be helpful. Who can we involve? And I think the more open we are in our homes and not jumping to the labels. I mean, I just think we get a little label happy in this country, and sometimes we're just having normal reactions to not okay things, and we just need someone to sit with us and get it, and to be present with us, and to show us that we matter and our feelings are important. And if we're struggling, sometimes it's okay to be not okay. And sometimes we just need to be acknowledged that things are really hard right now, and I'm going to sit with you. And I think that empathy piece really needs to be honed in, in the education setting, having empathy for each other, perspective taking, and the willingness to have those hard conversations instead of jumping to that panic place of, oh my gosh, something really serious. It might be, and we'll get there when we bridge that trust, bridge that conversation, bridge that connection, because there's a way to express it.
Thank you. Fern?
So this is one of these, this has been a year where we really saw just what Kristen said is true. It's absolutely, we're seeing that 100%. We're seeing, for instance, kids who are much older running in the halls, like that used to be like that would be an elementary thing, but you're too, but in middle, you're a little older and you don't run down the hallway or race your, like now you have kids doing things that are just like, what are they doing at this age, that size, doing things that are much younger. So we are seeing it is so confusing for educators and for parents. And so we do have to take stock of that and just allow us, understand that the kids are doing exactly what kids are going to do under these really I mean, these circumstances that we never could have imagined, right? So, and whatever they're doing, they are doing because there's a reason for it. Like it's normal under these circumstances. The one of the things I feel though is that if your child was a child who had some anxiety prior to the pandemic, who was more had a more difficult time with emotional regulation or coping, we are seeing those kids. The pandemic really has, for some of them, really made the transition back to quote unquote normal, going back to school in person again, really hard. So that kind of, we were talking about that those issues that we're really seeing when the child's having extreme difficulty getting to school, extreme difficulty managing and coping during the school day, it stands out because they're having a hard time meeting the demands of the now, right? Like getting through a day. So that's, I think it's really important at that point to be, in conversation with the school and again with community supports working together to help. And the fact is that anxiety, I know anxiety is a big topic. I feel like anxiety is something that's really treatable. It's something that we can really work with. And so if we can get good teamwork around that, we can help these kids develop some of the strategies and skills that they'll need. And it's again with anxiety, you're not just saying, oh, I want to get rid of my anxiety. You're learning to manage and cope and learn strategies, learning to, Lorraine was talking about recognizing what your body feels like, how your body and mind are connected and getting it, understanding that, and talk about SEL. That's exactly, so you're bringing your SEL skills to bear to help manage this experience you're having, this physiological response to the stressors in your environment. So I do one more thing that I would just say, understanding anxiety in particular, because I know somebody had talked about that. I think when a family feels that they're walking on eggshells, like they have a new guest in the house and the name of the guest is anxiety, and we're all going to work around that anxiety and manage the anxiety and cope with it, and it's kind of a presence in your home because you're doing all sorts of things to accommodate it, then the anxiety is it's needing to be, we need some coping skills, we need to pull together the supports for that child, and sometimes we have to deal with it in response to how it's affecting us, because typically we're doing all that dance with the anxiety in order to manage our own response to it, because it's really hard. So I just would, coming even from personal experience, I would really recommend trying to get ahead of that and work with professionals, however hard it is. Get on waiting lists. I know it's hard in New Hampshire. It's really, really hard. Our friends from California may not, I don't know how hard it is out there, but it's unbelievably hard to find support here. And so we struggle with that a lot. One thing I would highly recommend in that area is there's a wonderful podcast by Lynn Lyons, who is an expert in anxiety, and you can find her podcast, and she gives a lot of really, really great practical strategies for helping. So Lynn Lyons is a good podcast for that, and her book on that.
Gloria, did you want to add to that?
I was just kind of like double clicking some of the things Fern had already mentioned, and one is the validating and normalizing that these things are happening, right? And that's the open conversation with the child. And Clyde mentioned in the chat not to ask what's wrong, right? Or what's wrong with you, or what's wrong, but like what happened, right? And I think having those conversations where you are creating that container to have a dialogue with the child when you are not coming with judgment, right? Or worry, right? Maybe it comes out as judgment, but maybe in your emotions, what you are very worried, but to have more with curiosity. So really validating that, checking with the child, and that's something that I think it's important, not only in moments when we see our kids struggling, but on a regular basis, right? To have that dialogue. And then the second thing is, as Fern was saying, is to have that open communication with the school. When you are noticing that maybe there's a change in behavior, that you talk with the teacher, talk to the pediatrician. And I think that if we are proactive, we can get to the, to have put some supports in place for the child as soon as possible. So I would just add those two things.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, we've been talking about some resources. The panelists have brought up some wonderful resources, so we will add those. I'll add those in before we send them out to you folks. And I have another great one too. It's a book called Yardsticks by Chip Wood, and that will help parents and educators, on the call, understand, what can we expect from different stages of development. I think it's ages 4 to 14 is the focus, and that's really helpful. I mean, I actually just got the book out. I have a second grader, and he's getting a little cranky, little fussy, and pretty emotional. And I sent an email to his teacher. She said, "Lauren, get the book out." And I said, "Oh yeah, right, Trish, I get the book out." So I have to reread just because I have to remind myself. And sometimes when you're in it as a parent, it's different. And so I had to separate a little bit and, and just refresh, because it's important, to understand where our kids are at. So I'll put that resource in as well. We had a couple of, questions about COVID, and some impacts of COVID. And when we're coming up with, this idea for this panel, we didn't want to necessarily focus on COVID, and because we know that even prior to COVID, we really did start talking about social emotional learning and competence years ago, and it really was starting to take off prior to COVID. And we've really, almost in a way, it's if there's a positive, right, it's really come to the forefront, which I think is wonderful and exciting. And so important. So I guess I'll ask our panelists, if you could talk about the impact that COVID has had on teaching and learning, if we're getting any information or any research out there yet. We've heard a lot here about learning loss, and if maybe we could talk a little bit about what that really is, or how does it really look, and what we're finding for that. And then we did have somebody ask about possible long-term risks to young children growing up in a pandemic. So we can kind of separate those two. So maybe if you could talk a little bit about that impact that COVID's had on teaching and learning. Kristen, do you want to go first?
Sure. I have done a ton of research on this, and that's probably been our most popular presentation that we've done this last couple months, is just really looking. So I could speak a long time on this, and I won't, because I can share. I think some of the things we're seeing is that delay, right? And that social delay, and that our students are struggling because that flexibility, that shifting, a lot of them are sitting in front of a screen, and now they're having to figure out how to interact, how to cross share, how to collaborate, how to communicate. One of the things that's causing me the most concern, that I've been bringing to the attention of folks whenever I can, is this pressure to hurry and catch up. And it has me really concerned, because I don't think we were doing it well in 2020 before all this happened. I think we were getting a lot of research about what a realistic expectation for education was. And then COVID hit, and now there's this pressure. And I know a 5-year-old who is up at 5 in the morning, off the bus at 5 in the afternoon, and has homework. That's not a realistic work day. I don't know why we need 9 classes for our high schoolers, 7 classes for our middle schoolers, 6 classes for our elementary. My son alone, who's just starting high school, he's up at 5, he's home at 5, and has 2 to 3 hours of homework. And he says, I have no fun. And I don't want to live like that. Like, I don't want to work that kind of a work day. I don't think that's healthy. I think we have to put our perspective to give ourselves some permission of what does a healthy work day look like? What does a healthy school day look? What are we really trying? And some of the stuff we saw that was really successful was kids having 4 classes, and the rest of the time was on small group instruction, social justice projects, community collaboration, opportunity to sleep. I just think one of the big ones I want us to be cautious about is that we don't have this urgency to get back to the way it was, because the way it was, I don't think was working very effectively. And we are seeing some symptoms emerge by our kids feeling this pressure and our educators feeling this pressure to get them caught up, and you need to know this by now. And that's where we're seeing some more, struggles with regulation, struggles with focus, struggles with positive self-esteem. We're seeing a huge just mass exodus in education of a lot of educators leaving. Like, I was on a call the other day, and this whole group of people said their plan for next year was resignation. And we don't want that. We have good, amazing folks out there who want the best for kids. We as parents want the best for our kids. We want our kids to be happy. So those are just a few things. Like I said, I know our conversations about, because I think it's okay to challenge back, is what is a realistic day? And what do I really want for my 2nd grader versus my 4th grader versus my 8th grader, is what I'm saying.
Thank you, Kristen. Loraya?
Yeah, I think that this concept of learning laws is misleading, because there are many skills that our kids develop during the pandemic that we are not measuring, right? And I can tell you, my 3rd grader at the time, she learned a lot of executive functioning skills. She had a schedule on Monday and all the work that she needed to complete by the end of the week, and she needed to organize her week. So by Friday, all the work was done. That's a lot for an 8-year-old, right? And she successfully, with some tears, right, learned how to manage the week, how to organize the work. So the things that we ask kids to do develop skills, but maybe when the kids went back to school, that's something that didn't translate or we didn't measure, right? So I think that just, I just want to emphasize that this concept of learning laws is misleading, because it doesn't look at all of those other skills that kids learned and developed during the pandemic. And the other aspect is that I think that, back to what Kristen was saying around the system not being well, the fact that we are rushing again, I feel that it comes from wanting things to be in a certain way, right? To like that desire to go back to what it was. And the reality is that it is asking us to be a lot more flexible, and it's asking us to really respond to the needs of our students. And we know that if we want to be true to what our students need, we need to be really paying attention to their social and emotional skills, and then we can bring the academics, right? Like we have to kind of like switch the paradigm in order to make it work. But again, the emphasis, I think there's a dichotomy or a disconnect between what leadership is asking to schools and what educators are seeing that the kids actually need, and that's a challenge.
Thank you. Fern, did you want to add?
Well, I think I 100% agree. I think, it's really important for us to not get lost the fact of the adolescent, especially youth mental health crisis happening in this country and in New Hampshire, seriously, was terrible before the pandemic. So without the pandemic, we are hitting up to 36 to 39%. I'm really bad at remembering numbers, but it was somewhere in there kids expressing in high school on the youth risk behavior survey that all kids across the nation take, but in, expressing feelings of hopelessness and sadness, which are like the symptoms of depression, within the past year. So we are having a mental health crisis in this country with youth, and I do think it goes back exactly to a change in expectations, an overall cultural anxiety about success, and maybe it has to do with economic pressures because it's hard to, it's just so difficult now to live. So I don't know, it's we have got to get off this race to this change the pace. I really agree with that, and understand if we just sort of focus as families and say, and schools, and say, what do we want? If we really ask honestly what we want for our children, what in 10 years, where do we want them to be? And it's not necessarily that we want them always to be happy. Of course, we want them to be happy, right? But we want them to have emotions and be able to manage all the different kinds of experiences that they might confront, and know how to ask for help, and know how to be with people, know how, as some people in our state who talk a lot about trauma-informed work, know how to flock, know how to gather together with people who can give support. And so bringing all those bringing it back to SEL, but those are the critical skills that they're going to need to get through. So in the way that COVID has affected, the question was, how has COVID affected? It has really, really impacted. I think we've talked about it already. It's impacted the wellness of educators. It's impacted the wellness of families and kids. And so in the classrooms, we are seeing, we're seeing more kids in having difficulty coping with a school day, difficulty coping with setbacks, difficulty coping with relationship problems. So they're crying in the classroom, high school kids crying in the classroom. And I was thinking, I just was listening today to talking with some teachers after school today in a group that we're running, and they were explaining things, and it made me pause, because I was like, I don't think I ever remember in a classroom in high school just having someone crying in my high school classroom. That's not a time when we cry with our peers, we cry alone, we cry, right? Like, you're not typically so overwhelmed by your experience in school that you're crying in your classroom, through your classroom, and the teacher going, oh, I don't know what to do. And that one teacher explained that, and then every teacher on the screen said they have this happen frequently. Just the volume is up. We have more kids struggling and coping, and we have it happening with more intensity, more frequency, and more quantity. So there's just a lot more of this stuff going on during a school day, and it's really, really hard. The kids are really having a hard time. And there's a lot of equity issues. So like, we have a lot of kids who did get a lot of learning done, as Lorena was saying, learning strategies and learning how to executive functioning. And then we had a lot of kids whose families were just making it through, and so they didn't have the support. So they essentially spent a lot of time on screens. And so another big thing we're seeing is, like, I know we're still working on finding evidence as if there's such thing as screen addiction, but if you walk through a school, you're going to just welcome to seeing anecdotal evidence of it, because kids are just, it's really hard to break that and get back into being learners from, in person and engaged in a classroom learning environment. So we have some impacts, teaching and learning.
Thank you.
That's a lot.
Thank you all. Yeah. I want to be mindful of the time. It's about 9 minutes before 8. And I want to save just 2 minutes at the end so that I can bring everybody back on the slides. We have some resources from our panelists that I just want to show you. And again, everything will be sent to you via email, but I just want to pull the slide up one more time. So Karen, can I just ask you, how's it going in the chat?
How's it going in the chat? So I just want to thank Laura for writing in and suggested that, the phrase learning loss And I agree with this idea, and you've all been saying this idea of learning loss creates a feeling of inadequacy in the student, right? So Laura was just saying, don't call it learning loss, just teach, basically what she's saying is teach the student where they're at, right? Without labeling that. And there's a question in here. I've read that ADD is on the rise due to technology and the environment. I would be interested in hearing from the panelists about that. I am an elementary educator, and I feel like there needs to be a shift in expectations on the part of educators regarding behavior and how to respond to this energy without first turning to punishment for misbehavior. So.
Okay, I can totally chime in on this one. I think we get a little label happy in this country with putting names to things. And there is some research being done on screen time and what that does to peripheral vision and focus. And our kids are in front of a screen a lot. I think we just need to slow down. I think if we're teaching our kids 10 things that they need to do every day, and one of those 10 is 2 hours max recreational screen time a day. There's been so much research and new research emerging. I think that if I am not actively sleeping, eating healthy, exercising, expressing gratitude, challenging myself, being a teammate, minimizing my screen time, laughing, breathing, if I'm not doing those 10 things that will help my regulation kick in, that will help me release those healthy chemicals, then I'm setting my body up to struggle with regulation. And a lot of times what we're seeing in classrooms, kids who just are struggling to get into and stay into their upstairs brain, and their emotional regulation capacity hasn't developed yet. So as classroom teachers and as parents, we should be practicing those 10 things. We should be teaching regulation on a regular basis, common language on where are you at, learning ready, learning compromise, not learning ready. We should be implementing those regulation resets into our classroom, assessing the max focus time of our kids. And if the max focus time of my class is 5 minutes, why am I pushing them 10? Let's put in a brain break there. So I think a lot of it just is around regulation and how are we teaching, enhancing, and
Thank you, Kristen.
I have some passion about that, if you can't tell.
Love it. Larea?
I would just add what Kristen was saying made me think of a recent post that I wrote on the future of learning and thinking about the importance of student engagement, right? And how if we want students to really be motivated and self-regulated, the engagement is such an important piece. And we know that many students are bored to death in our classrooms, right? And we keep doing the same things over and over, waiting for different results, right? I think that that concept that students actually have interests and passions and things that they want to learn about that we can bring into the classroom, so they are going to be more engaged, more self-regulated, more motivated, is something we really need to consider, because I think that the disconnect with how kids nowadays are learning between school and outside, like I'm always fascinated by all the YouTube creators that are teaching people all kinds of skills, right? And even kids in high school, they go to YouTube to learn the algebra, the geometry, all their courses in a different way, right? So I think that that idea of really bringing the student engagement piece into the classroom and considering what can we do to like flip the script and really bring what students want to learn and use that as a hook to help them develop the instructional and the academic skills they need, but really doing in a student-centered way is going to be, in my opinion, the way that we can move forward from the pandemic and really support our kids.
Thank you, Larea. Fern, do you want the last word on this one? She says, I'm good.
No, I think I just agree. I double click on those things too.
We like that. We're going to use that now.
I like that one.
I like it a lot. Well, wonderful. I think what I would like to do is share my screen again and share with you. Hang on, folks. We heard from our panelists. You were all wonderful. This was, this was wonderful. Thank you so very much. This was just lovely. I have three slides here for each of the panelists. And so this is, again, you'll be getting this in your inbox, but this is for Larea. There's a great QR code here you can use it's for the blog, right, Larea?
It's for the book.
It's for your book. Okay.
Yeah.
And the blog's on your website. Okay, excellent. I was looking at your blog, so that's what I was thinking. So Larea's website is here, her contact. So for each of these three panelists, we have contact information. And so there's a contact, and then there is the QR code for the book. It's fabulous. It's worth a read or two. I'm reading it again right now. So it's lovely. And so I hope that you all will check that book out for sure. And then Kristen, I put Fostering Resilient Learners on here. We have her website as well and contact. This is another fabulous read. So if you haven't read it, I know we've read this book in one of my schools. I read it. And so I know that there have been a lot of book groups here in the state reading this book. So this is a fabulous read. If you haven't read it, please read it. And then Fern's favorites. Fern, I made you a slide of your favorites, and we're going to add on because you shared some more with us. So I'm going to add a few more websites to our main resource page, which I'll show you in a second. Any quick tips for either of these books, Fern, that you might like to share with folks?
I just think that Dan Siegel's work is really, really, really fundamental and can help parents so much. So I've done a lot of work with teachers using this. It's written for parents. I've done tons of work with teachers and to have talked with parents about this book as well. And I cannot say enough. It's, it really, really is helpful to understand. And I think this is just a great time to practice self-compassion. And on Kristen Neff's website, there's some good, very nice meditations. And I really, really can't say enough about the importance of finding that, self-regulation and working on that for ourselves during this time. And then I have lots of different resources on my website. So
perfect. Thank you, Fern. Let's see. Great. Karen, can you catch that, or do you want me to do that?
I got it. I already put, so for all of you, there's a link to a feedback survey in the chat. And certainly the easiest way to make that happen is to do it in the moment and just click on the chat link and go for it. Yeah. Christine Hodson just shared a podcast called The Happiness Lab.
Oh, that's a great one. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
We can add that. Why not? You'll also see we've put together, these are live links. So mindfulness for families and educators. This is just from Demonstrated Success. Have some activities in here for mindfulness that you can do with your kiddos at home and or bring to your classrooms. And again, more resources. So I'm going to fill this up with this SEL one right here. I'm going to fill this up with what we've talked about tonight in terms of the Bureau, student wellness, yardsticks, greater good, happiness lab, Lynn Lyons, which I believe is called Fluster Clucks. And it's excellent and humorous. You will enjoy it. So I am just going to put our contact information up again, and I'm going to say thank you. I feel like I can't say it enough, but thank you to Larea, Kristen, and Fern. You are wonderful and brilliant, and we've learned so much. And thank you so much for spending an hour and a half with us of your days and evenings, Fern. You're the only one on the East Coast here, Fern, but so thank you so much. We're very grateful.
And if you want to make any suggestions about how we're doing another one of these in April, and you'll get the information. And it's going to focus on technology and technology use, healthy technology use for kids. And so certainly go on to the survey and the link. I'm going to put it once more in there. to make some suggestions, okay, for anything you also want to see going forward. So,
Thanks
Thank you all so much.
Thank
Thank
you. Have a wonderful
thank you,
evening.
Kristen.